Imagine being told, just days before Christmas, that you are no longer who you thought you were. That all the privileges, all the expectations, all the family gatherings you grew up dreaming of are suddenly stripped away. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, found himself in that exact situation in 2025. The phone call that should have been warm, familial, a chance to reunite and celebrate the season, instead delivered a shock so profound it shook him to his core. "You're not royalty anymore," King Charles said. Simple words, yet devastating. For Harry, those words weren't just a rejection. They were a verdict, and the fallout would ripple far beyond the walls of Buckingham Palace. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. From the outside, the royal family has always seemed like a picture-perfect institution. Glittering crowns, poised smiles, and festive traditions that stretch back centuries. But anyone who has looked closely knows that behind the golden gates, tensions simmer, and decisions are often far from what they appear in the press. For Harry, the 2025 Christmas season was supposed to be a chance for reconciliation, for returning to his roots, for showing his children the family traditions he grew up cherishing. Instead, it became a dramatic flashpoint in a saga that has captivated the world for nearly a decade. Now, you might be asking yourself, why would King Charles deny his own son this one request? After all, family is supposed to come first, especially at Christmas. The answer, as we'll uncover in this story, is far more complex, a tangled web of loyalty, betrayal, public perception, and private grudges that the media has only scratched the surface of. This isn't just a story about a holiday snub. It's about power, identity, and a family at war with itself, all unfolding on the most public of stages. The drama began weeks before the call. Harry had quietly reached out to his father, not through the press, not via social media, but through private channels. He wanted a simple thing: to attend the annual royal Christmas celebrations with his family. To see his father, his brother, his grandmother, and to bring his children to the palace, to experience the tradition that had shaped so much of his life. It seemed, on paper, reasonable. After all, no one had asked him to renounce his public life entirely, and for many, family ties are meant to transcend politics, media, and past grievances. But as the days ticked closer to December 25th, tensions within the royal household grew palpable. Advisors whispered in corridors. Courtiers exchanged cautious glances. Even the staff, who often remain invisible in these stories, sensed the shift. Rumors began to leak. Not officially, of course, but enough that insiders feared the Christmas gathering would be anything but joyful. Harry, unaware of the undercurrents, was preparing, in his mind, for a reunion that might heal old wounds. Little did he know that what awaited him would do the opposite. When the call finally came, it was not a conversation. It was a decree. King Charles, steady in voice but unyielding in tone, delivered the words that would ignite headlines worldwide. "You're not royalty anymore." There was no preamble, no discussion of compromises, no mention of past grievances. Just a stark statement of fact. For Harry, the message was clear. He was an outsider, not just in the eyes of the public, but in the eyes of the family he had once called home. The shock was immediate. His hands trembled. His heart raced. And yet, even in that moment of profound disbelief, he could not shake a flicker of hope. Perhaps, he thought, there was a way to turn this around. Perhaps there was a loophole, a misunderstanding, a chance to plead his case. But as viewers watching this story unfold, we need to pause and ask, how does a family go from love to estrangement in such a short span? How does a prince, a son of the monarch, become someone whose presence is considered undesirable at a family celebration? To answer that, we must trace the events leading up to this moment. We must understand the history, the grievances, the public statements, and the private conflicts that have simmered for years. And most importantly, we must consider the human element. Harry, a man caught between his loyalty to family and his commitment to truth and personal integrity. The stakes were high. This was not merely a personal rejection. It was a message to the world. If Harry could not be trusted within the palace walls, what did that mean for the monarchy's image, for public perception, and for the fragile narrative that binds centuries of tradition? Media outlets immediately began to speculate. Headlines screamed about family rifts. Social media erupted with speculation, memes, and fervent debate. Some voiced sympathy for Harry. Others argued that the prince had already removed himself from royal obligations and should accept the consequences. And in the midst of this frenzy, Harry faced a dilemma that no amount of wealth, title, or public support could easily solve. How to respond without inflaming an already volatile situation. The human side of this story cannot be overstated. Behind the official communications and formal photographs are emotions, old resentments, and unmet expectations. Harry had grown up in the shadow of immense public scrutiny. From a young age, he learned that every action could be magnified, every word analyzed. The Christmas snub, therefore, was more than a missed dinner or an empty chair at the table. It was symbolic of a deeper estrangement, a fracture that had been building for years between father and son. And yet, it also forced Harry to confront questions about identity, legacy, and the meaning of family in a life lived so publicly. Adding to the tension was the fact that Meghan Markle, ever the strategist, had her own perspective on the unfolding events. Behind the scenes, she was already weighing the options: public statements, interviews, social media responses, and private counsel. How much to push? How much to withhold? The stakes were enormous, not just for the couple, but for their children, for their public image, and for the narrative that millions around the world were already following. Every move had consequences, and the slightest misstep could ignite a media firestorm capable of affecting reputations and relationships alike. This story also raises questions that resonate far beyond the palace walls. How do modern families navigate conflict when history, media, and public expectation collide? What does loyalty look like when tradition clashes with personal values? How much weight should a family give to appearances, and how much to genuine reconciliation? These are questions not just for royals, but for anyone watching and thinking about their own family dynamics, especially when faced with disappointment and estrangement. But let's return to that fateful phone call. Imagine Harry, sitting alone, the cold winter light filtering through the window, children playing quietly in the next room, hearing the words that would define his Christmas. Imagine the mix of shock, disbelief, and hurt. Imagine a man forced to reconcile public perception with private pain. And now, imagine the ripple effect: courtiers whispering, advisors scrambling, the media alerting their editors, and family members quietly preparing for the consequences of this unprecedented decision. And yet, even in this moment of despair, there is a question that hangs over the story like a shadow. How will Harry respond? Will he accept the decision quietly, retreating into private life once more? Will he fight back, publicly or privately, against what he perceives as injustice? Or will he chart an entirely new path, one that surprises everyone, from the monarchy to the media to the millions who follow his life with intense fascination? The call came on a crisp December morning, the kind where frost clings to the edges of windows, and the air carries the scent of pine and winter festivities. Harry had been anticipating this moment for weeks, not in a casual way. No, this was calculated, cautious, filled with hope and the tiniest flicker of anxiety. He had rehearsed the words, the tone, the pauses. He wanted it to be perfect. He wanted this call to be a bridge, a chance to return to the family he had left behind, even if only for a few hours. "Father," he began, voice steady but tinged with nervousness. "I wanted to ask if I could join the family for Christmas this year, for the celebrations at Sandringham." On the other end of the line, King Charles paused. The silence stretched. It wasn't a dramatic pause meant to build suspense. It was a quiet, deliberate assessment, a measure of whether Harry truly understood what he was asking. And then, the words dropped like a hammer. "You're not royalty anymore." Harry froze, a chill rushing through him that had nothing to do with the winter air. He had expected hesitation, perhaps negotiation, perhaps a reluctant yes. He had not expected this. A blunt, undeniable dismissal. In that moment, Harry realized something that perhaps he had feared for years. The monarchy had drawn a line, and he was now on the other side. What makes a rejection like this so devastating is that it's not about Christmas dinner. It's about identity, legacy, and the invisible strings that bind a family together. Harry had grown up immersed in the pageantry, the traditions, the rituals that marked royal life. Christmas wasn't just a date on a calendar. It was a living, breathing tapestry of family, history, and ceremony. To be barred from it wasn't just hurtful. It was symbolic. As he hung up the phone, Harry's mind raced. How had it come to this? He recalled the early years of his childhood, playing in the gardens, laughter echoing through corridors, the smell of roast meats filling the palace kitchens. Those memories were vivid, almost tangible, and now they felt like a luxury he could no longer access. He thought about his children, about showing them the traditions that had shaped his own life. Was he to be the outsider watching from afar, telling stories of a Christmas he couldn't attend firsthand? Even more than the personal sting, Harry knew the ramifications were immediate. News of this call, if it leaked, would ignite the media. It would dominate headlines. And in the world of royals, headlines are more than words. They are power, perception, and influence. To be excluded wasn't just an emotional blow, it was a statement to the public. Harry is no longer part of the institution. His actions, his words, his life outside the palace, none of it mattered anymore within these walls. And yet, Harry wasn't ready to accept defeat. He didn't hang up and retreat. He didn't immediately storm off in anger. Instead, he sat, breathing heavily, thinking, how could this be turned around? Was there a compromise? Was there a way to show that family, tradition, and love could transcend past disagreements? Perhaps, he thought, there was a path back, even if it was narrow, treacherous, and uncertain. Meanwhile, within the palace, the news had already begun to ripple. Courtiers whispered in hallways, assistants passed hurried notes, and advisors prepared for the inevitable fallout. The royal household is a machine finely tuned to manage optics, narratives, and appearances. But this was something the palace had not anticipated. A public confrontation with private implications. A son demanding entry to family celebration, a father drawing the line. It was the kind of tension that could define the monarchy for months to come. Back in his home, Harry's mind wasn't just on the palace or the protocol. It was on Meghan. He knew her mind would be racing too, plotting, calculating, strategizing. They had faced public scrutiny together for years, endured the media's relentless gaze, and survived scandals that would have crushed anyone else. This was another storm, another challenge. And as Harry considered the coming days, he understood one immutable truth. Whatever he did next, it would not just affect him. It would affect the family, the monarchy, and the world watching. Harry's initial shock began to give way to planning. He thought about making a counteroffer, a gesture of goodwill, perhaps suggesting a private meeting, a brief attendance, a compromise. Yet even as he imagined these solutions, he knew the palace might interpret it as weakness or entitlement. In the royal sphere, even emotion is political. Every step is scrutinized, every word a potential headline, every gesture a symbol. Harry had lived in this world all his life, and now he had to navigate it from the outside looking in. At the same time, the emotional weight of exclusion pressed down on him. Rejection by one's parent is never easy, but rejection on this scale, in the public eye, carries layers of complexity. Harry felt anger, of course. He felt disappointment and hurt. But beneath it all was a profound sense of vulnerability, a reminder that even princes are human, that even those born into privilege can be denied access to the places that matter most to their hearts. And there was another layer, one that few outside the inner circle would ever truly understand. Harry knew that this decision wasn't just about him. It was about Meghan, his children, and the message that was being sent to them in the world. In the delicate dance of monarchy, symbolism is everything. By denying Harry access, King Charles was signaling more than a family boundary. He was signaling a shift in power, a reaffirmation of authority, and a subtle warning to anyone who might challenge it. As the day progressed, Harry's advisors began to weigh in. Friends and confidants, people who had stood by him during the most tumultuous years, offered counsel. Some urged patience, diplomacy, and measured response. Others, fueled by frustration and a sense of injustice, encouraged immediate action, public statements, or even media leaks. Harry was caught between caution and instinct, between the desire to protect his family and the need to assert his own identity. And through it all, the world outside waited, unaware of the full drama unfolding behind closed doors. Social media would soon be ablaze with speculation. Journalists would scramble for details. Public opinion would polarize. Some would side with Harry, some with the palace, and some would simply watch in fascination, captivated by the human story unfolding within the gilded corridors of power. But Harry's journey was far from over. He knew, instinctively, that the real battle was just beginning. A simple no from his father had ignited a chain reaction that would test his patience, his strategy, and his resilience. And as he stared at the phone, replaying the conversation in his mind, he understood that the coming days would be pivotal, not just for Christmas 2025, but for the future of his relationship with his family and the monarchy itself. He didn't yet know how events would unfold. He didn't yet know who would step forward as allies or who would emerge as adversaries. But one thing was clear. The request that shook the palace had set in motion a series of events that would leave no one untouched. Every word, every gesture, every move from here on out would carry weight. Every decision would have consequences. And just when he thought he had a moment to breathe, a message arrived. Not from the palace, not from his father, not from Meghan, but from an unexpected source, one that would complicate everything Harry thought he knew about loyalty, trust, and the meaning of family. The news reached Meghan not through the press, not through whispered rumors in the corridors of the palace, but through Harry himself. It was a short, tight message, almost clipped in its delivery, but loaded with every ounce of emotion Harry had been holding back. He said, "I'm not royalty anymore." For Meghan, those words were more than a shock. They were a spark. She had been preparing herself for battles in the public eye for years, but this was different. This was personal. The monarchy had just drawn a line in the sand, and she knew immediately that the world would soon be watching every reaction, every move, and every statement. The question on her mind wasn't just about Harry. It was about her children, her family, and her own identity. How could they be denied access to the traditions and heritage that their father had once been a part of? Her first instinct was strategy. Meghan had learned early in her public life that timing is everything. A misstep here, a hastily released statement there, and the media would spin the story out of control. She paced the room, hands clasped, calculating the next move. Her mind was a whirlwind of scenarios, public statements, social media posts, interviews, and private communications. Each option carried its own risks and potential fallout. Every word spoken could be dissected, turned into a headline, and used to fuel narratives that were already spinning out of control. But Meghan's response wasn't just about tactics. It was about emotion. There was frustration, yes, but also anger, a simmering fire that had been building for years. She thought about how Harry had been isolated from the family, how every attempt at reconciliation had been met with resistance or dismissal. She thought about the countless interviews, the public scrutiny, the relentless media narratives that had painted them in the worst possible light. And now, here was a tangible reminder. The family was still drawing boundaries, still refusing to embrace him fully, still protecting traditions at the expense of their own kin. In that room, Meghan made a decision. She would not be passive. She would not wait for the palace to change its mind, and she would not let Harry face this alone. The first step was communication, but not with the world, not yet. She dialed Harry's number. The conversation was brief but intense, filled with a mix of reassurance, strategy, and urgency. "We need to think carefully about this," she said. "We can't just react. But we also can't let this slide. It's bigger than just one Christmas." And indeed, it was bigger. The implications of Charles's decision extended far beyond one festive gathering. This was a statement about power, hierarchy, and the enforcement of boundaries within the royal family. By denying Harry's presence, the monarchy had signaled that past grievances could determine present privileges. Meghan understood the gravity immediately. This wasn't about a holiday dinner. This was about legacy, public perception, and the invisible rules that governed who belonged and who was excluded. Behind closed doors, Meghan began plotting her counter-strategy. She reviewed past interviews, press coverage, and public sentiment. She thought about allies, potential leaks, and the messaging that could shape the narrative in Harry's favor. Her mind was methodical, almost surgical, slicing through the noise to find leverage points, opportunities, and potential allies within and outside the palace walls. Every move she considered was calculated to maximize impact while minimizing risk, but she knew, intuitively, that the palace would be watching every step. Emotionally, Meghan was also navigating a complicated terrain. She knew that her instincts to fight back would be questioned, criticized, and perhaps even condemned by some. Public reaction would be mixed. Some would see her as protective, loyal, and assertive. Others would paint her as manipulative, controlling, and power-hungry. But Meghan had learned to live in this duality, to accept the polarized reactions as part of the price of visibility, influence, and survival. Meanwhile, Meghan's thoughts continually returned to the children. Archie and Lilibet were young, but perceptive. She wondered how much they understood about the tension, the estrangement, the invisible lines drawn by their grandfather. Could they sense Harry's disappointment? Could they feel the subtle exclusion that would shape their perception of family, tradition, and loyalty? Protecting them became a central concern, guiding her decisions in ways that were both strategic and deeply emotional. But Meghan was not one to act without reflection. She weighed every possible outcome, every potential consequence. Should they go public immediately? Should they let the news simmer and see how the palace reacted? How could they control the narrative without escalating tensions? Each scenario played out in her mind like a chessboard, with pawns, knights, and queens representing not just people, but ideas, perceptions, and reputations. And then there was the personal side, the human side of Meghan's reaction that no media outlet could capture fully. There was hurt, certainly, at the realization that the family Harry loved so deeply could exclude him so decisively. There was frustration, yes, at the seeming unwillingness to acknowledge past mistakes, to embrace reconciliation, or to extend compassion. And there was determination, a burning resolve that the story would not end here. Meghan knew that inaction was not an option. To outsiders, her actions may have appeared cold, calculated, even intimidating. But those closest to her understood a deeper truth. Every decision, every plan, every word considered, was guided by a combination of loyalty, love, and survival instinct. Meghan was protecting Harry, protecting the children, and positioning herself and her family to respond to what she saw as an unjust and deeply personal attack. As the hours passed, Meghan began to outline a clear approach. She would monitor media reaction, prepare responses, and maintain direct lines of communication with Harry. She would also consider public messaging, carefully calibrated to highlight fairness, family loyalty, and personal integrity without unnecessarily inflaming the situation. It was a delicate balance, one that required both tactical brilliance and emotional intelligence. Even within the private confines of their home, Meghan could feel the tension building. The world outside, unaware of the intricacies, would soon weigh in. Journalists would speculate. Social media would erupt. Public opinion would form in hours, not days. And every move she made would be scrutinized, dissected, and interpreted in ways she could not fully control. Yet amidst the strategic calculations, Meghan also found moments of reflection. She thought about the history that had led to this moment, the personal sacrifices, the public scrutiny, and the ongoing challenges of life in the spotlight. She reminded herself that while the palace wielded power, influence, and tradition, she and Harry possessed resilience, public support, and a narrative that resonated with millions. This knowledge strengthened her resolve. And then came the first test. A brief, seemingly innocuous note from a palace insider, hinting that some family members were uneasy about the situation. Not everyone agreed with Charles's decision. The leak was small, almost imperceptible, but it suggested cracks in the facade. Meghan immediately recognized its potential. Allies within the family could shift the balance, offering opportunities to influence outcomes and perhaps even reopen doors that had been closed. But even with this glimmer of hope, Meghan knew that the road ahead would be treacherous. Every decision carried risks. Every move could escalate or defuse tensions. The coming days would test their patience, strategy, and emotional endurance. And just when she thought she had anticipated every possibility, a new development would emerge, one that none of them could predict, and one that would force Meghan to reconsider everything she thought she knew about family, loyalty, and influence. The stage was set, the players in motion, and the tension building to a breaking point. And in that quiet moment, behind closed doors, Meghan realized that this Christmas would be unlike any they had ever experienced. The world would soon see the fallout, but the story behind the headlines, the private struggles, the calculated decisions, the emotional stakes, was only just beginning. When a single decision reverberates through centuries of tradition, the effects are rarely contained. King Charles's declaration that Harry was not royalty anymore did not just impact one man. It sent shockwaves through the entire royal family. Behind the polished portraits, ceremonial pomp, and meticulously rehearsed smiles, fault lines began to appear. Alliances shifted. Opinions hardened. Conversations whispered in corridors became strategic maneuvers. The family, long seen as a united front to the public, was revealing cracks that had long been ignored. Within hours of Harry's rejection, the palace was a hub of quiet tension. William, the Prince of Wales, was perhaps the first to respond internally, though his reaction was measured. He had long maintained a careful balance between duty, public image, and personal feelings. Privately, he sympathized with Harry's disappointment. He knew his brother's longing for family connection, but duty to the crown and loyalty to their father weighed heavily on his decisions. In discussions with senior advisors, he expressed concern about public perception and the potential fallout, but he did not intervene. It was a choice that would not go unnoticed. Kate, Duchess of Cambridge, similarly found herself in a delicate position. Though always known for her diplomacy and composure, she understood the broader implications of the decision. Kate's loyalty to Charles and William, combined with her natural caution, made her approach the situation carefully. She offered support to her husband behind closed doors, yet also recognized the undercurrents that could shift public opinion. Every word, every gesture, had consequences not only for family relationships but for the monarchy's image. Meanwhile, Princess Anne, known for her straightforwardness and strong principles, was quietly assessing the situation. She had always been more independent than her siblings and had often prioritized duty and personal conviction over appearances, and reportedly expressed unease about the timing and the harshness of Charles's decision. She recognized the emotional impact on Harry, but also the historical and institutional pressures guiding the king's choices. Her internal struggle reflected a broader tension within the family: loyalty versus empathy, duty versus personal bonds. The division within the royal family was not limited to the senior members. Extended relatives, cousins, and even household staff sensed the tension. Whispers traveled quickly, and rumors began to leak into the media, intentionally or not. Some family members quietly supported Harry, believing the decision to exclude him was too harsh. Others aligned closely with Charles, arguing that the monarchy's rules and protocols must be upheld, regardless of personal relationships. The palace, often viewed as monolithic and unified, was revealing a complex network of opinions, loyalties, and dissent. Publicly, the family maintained a composed exterior. Photographs, statements, and appearances continued as scheduled. Yet behind the scenes, strategy meetings, private calls, and hurried discussions became the norm. Advisors carefully calibrated messaging, weighing every possible angle. The goal was twofold: maintain the appearance of unity and control, while preparing for potential backlash if Harry or Meghan made moves that could dominate headlines. At the same time, the media was beginning to speculate. Journalists, informed by insiders and palace correspondents, reported on the internal divisions without revealing the full picture. Headlines hinted at discord. Royal family split over Duke of Sussex Christmas attendance. Charles draws the line with Harry. Palace tensions rise as Christmas nears. The public, always hungry for royal drama, engaged immediately. Social media erupted with debate, and public opinion began to polarize. For every commentator siding with the king, there was another defending Harry's right to attend. The divisions within the family were not only about Christmas plans. They reflected years of unresolved conflict, personality clashes, and differing visions of duty and tradition. Charles's insistence on protocol and hierarchy clashed with Harry's desire for emotional connection and familial reconciliation. William and Kate, while sympathetic, were acutely aware of the optics and potential long-term consequences. And, though independent, weighed the implications of each action on her own legacy and the broader institution. Each member faced a delicate balancing act: maintain personal values, honor family bonds, and protect the monarchy from public controversy. For Harry, the division was both painful and revealing. Privately, he had hoped for subtle support from certain family members, a quiet ally who might influence the king or offer guidance. Instead, he discovered a complex web of loyalties that was not easily navigated. Some extended family members were openly sympathetic, sending messages of encouragement and subtle advice. Others remained distant, silent, or even critical, their disapproval underscoring the emotional isolation Harry now felt. Meghan, ever perceptive, quickly recognized the significance of these internal divisions. She understood that the family was not a monolith and that careful strategy could exploit the fault lines to their advantage. Yet she also realized the risks. Any overt manipulation could backfire, deepen resentments, or be spun by the media in a damaging way. Meghan and Harry began discussing which family members might act as allies, which would remain neutral, and which could be considered obstacles. This strategic assessment was not about confrontation. It was about survival, influence, and protecting their family unit from further harm. Even small interactions became loaded with significance. A glance during a meeting, a passing comment, a delayed response. All were interpreted as signals of loyalty or dissent. The palace, normally accustomed to subtle power plays, now found itself navigating the most visible family dispute in decades. Advisors warned that any public misstep could inflame tensions, harm reputations, and dominate news cycles for weeks. The delicate balance of maintaining dignity while managing emotion was suddenly under immense pressure. The rift extended beyond protocol and tradition. It struck at the core of familial bonds. Harry, Meghan, and the children were no longer considered part of the inner circle in the traditional sense, and that exclusion weighed heavily on all involved. Conversations that once seemed casual and light now carried emotional weight and potential consequences. For Harry, the pain was compounded by the knowledge that reconciliation required not just dialogue but trust. A trust that had been eroded over years of conflict, media scrutiny, and perceived betrayals. Tensions escalated further when subtle leaks began to emerge. Select media outlets, often fed information by palace insiders, hinted at disagreements between siblings, cousins, and advisors. Stories suggested that even among the closest family members, opinions differed on how to handle Harry's request. Some argued for compassion, emphasizing family unity and the importance of Christmas as a time for reconciliation. Others stressed adherence to rules and precedent, arguing that making exceptions could weaken authority and invite further complications. As the family navigated these complexities, Harry and Meghan continued to assess their options. They realized that any engagement with sympathetic family members could be leveraged to create a path forward, but only if handled with precision. Missteps could reinforce Charles's position, inflame divisions, or make their own actions appear aggressive or self-serving. Every interaction became a test of patience, strategy, and emotional intelligence. And yet, amid the tension and uncertainty, small moments of hope emerged. Private messages of support, subtle gestures, and cautious empathy reminded Harry that not all doors were closed. Some family members quietly conveyed that the king's decision, while firm, did not reflect the sentiments of everyone. Allies existed, albeit carefully hidden behind layers of protocol and discretion. Identifying and navigating these hidden currents became a priority, as Harry realized that the path to resolution, or at least understanding, would require both courage and cunning. By now, the stage was set for a multi-layered conflict. Public perception, private emotions, and institutional rules were all colliding in ways that could have long-lasting implications. Harry was caught in the middle, Meghan by his side, and the royal family divided. The world outside remained largely unaware of the true depth of these divisions, but soon the consequences would spill into public view, forcing everyone, inside and outside the palace, to confront uncomfortable truths about family, loyalty, and authority. And just when it seemed that tensions had reached their peak, an unexpected twist emerged. A family member, previously silent and reserved, made a decision that would ripple through the palace, challenging alliances and forcing both sides to reconsider their positions. This move, subtle yet consequential, hinted at a potential turning point, but also opened the door to even more dramatic confrontations in the days to come. The royal family's division was no longer just a private matter. It was now a story of strategy, emotion, and power. And the world would soon see just how far these fractures would go, and what they might cost the family, the monarchy, and Harry himself. Within hours of King Charles's decision to deny Harry access to the 2025 Christmas celebrations, the news had broken beyond the palace walls. Whispers, once contained within corridors and private calls, erupted into a cacophony of headlines, social media posts, and speculation. For Harry and Meghan, the private anguish of exclusion was now layered with the public pressure of being scrutinized by millions. The media, as always, was relentless, and this time, it had a story that combined every element the world craved: royalty, family drama, scandal, and betrayal. It began subtly. A few insider sources reported that Harry had requested to attend the family festivities. At first, outlets used tentative language. Prince Harry reportedly asks to join Christmas celebrations. But the story quickly escalated. Within hours, the narrative transformed from speculation to certainty. Harry denied Christmas with royal family, blared across digital news platforms. Tweets multiplied, Instagram feeds lit up, and forums buzzed with debates. The story was irresistible. It had drama, emotion, and stakes, everything a media storm thrives on. The immediate challenge for Harry and Meghan was managing perception. They had anticipated some level of media interest, but the speed and intensity of the coverage was staggering. Stories didn't just report events, they interpreted them. Headlines suggested rifts, painted motives, and often inserted commentary as fact. Royal family split deepens. Duke of Sussex cast out again. King Charles draws line with son. The narrative was being crafted before Harry and Meghan could even respond. Meghan recognized the urgency instantly. She knew the media had the power to shape public opinion, and in this digital age, narratives spread faster than any press release could control. Her first move was containment, a carefully worded private statement to a select journalist known for fair reporting. The statement emphasized family loyalty, Harry's desire for reconciliation, and the personal disappointment of the situation, without overtly criticizing the monarchy. It was a tightrope walk, designed to humanize Harry while avoiding any escalation. Meanwhile, social media became a battlefield. Fans of Harry and Meghan, long vocal and fiercely protective, expressed outrage. Tweets, memes, and viral posts flooded feeds. How can the king deny his own son? Harry deserves Christmas with family. Monarchy failing the next generation. The reaction was immediate and polarized. Supporters of the royal family countered, defending the king's decision, arguing that Harry had voluntarily distanced himself from royal duties and should accept the consequences. The digital clash intensified the emotional stakes, making it impossible for the story to remain purely private. Traditional media outlets capitalized on the frenzy. Television anchors dissected the situation with expert panels. Former courtiers, royal biographers, and cultural commentators analyzed every detail. They debated Charles's authority, Harry's choices, and the implications for the monarchy. Newspapers ran feature articles, some sympathetic, some critical, often with striking photographs of Harry and Meghan juxtaposed against the festive royal backdrop. The visual imagery alone reinforced the narrative of exclusion and estrangement. For Harry, the media storm was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it amplified his emotional pain, turning private family dynamics into global spectacle. On the other hand, it offered leverage. Public sentiment, if swayed correctly, could influence the palace's approach. Meghan understood this instinctively. She recognized that controlling the narrative, or at least influencing it, was essential to their strategy. Timing, framing, and selective leaks would all become critical tools in navigating the unfolding storm. In parallel, palace advisors scrambled to manage optics. They crafted official statements emphasizing unity, holiday tradition, and the importance of private family matters. They attempted to dampen speculation, but in the age of digital media, containment was nearly impossible. Every report prompted hundreds of online reactions, generating more stories, more commentary, and more pressure on the royal family. Even neutral or factual coverage fueled debates, turning the situation into a self-perpetuating cycle of attention and scrutiny. Harry and Meghan also faced challenges in their personal communications. Phone calls, emails, and private messages were intercepted by tabloids or leaked through anonymous sources. Trusted confidants cautioned them to be careful, but the sheer volume of attention made privacy nearly impossible. Every decision carried weight. Respond too strongly, and the monarchy could be framed as victimized. Remain silent, and public opinion might turn against them. The pressure was relentless. Amid this chaos, analysts noted a particularly troubling element: the framing of the story in the context of past controversies. Harry and Meghan's history of media battles made the narrative richer, more sensational, and more polarized. Outlets reminded the public of previous conflicts. The Megxit announcement, media lawsuits, public interviews, and other family disputes. Context, selectively presented, shaped perception. For the casual observer, the Christmas exclusion appeared as the latest episode in a decades-long saga of estrangement and tension. But not all coverage was predictable. Independent journalists highlighted nuance, pointing out the complexities: Charles's role as king, Harry's voluntary distance from royal duties, the balance between public expectations and private family needs. These perspectives provided context that was often lost in mainstream reporting, but were slower to permeate public consciousness. Meanwhile, social media amplified the most sensational and emotional angles, ensuring that the story remained hot in public discourse. For Meghan, the media storm was both challenge and opportunity. She recognized that careful engagement could shape public perception, create pressure for reconsideration, and humanize Harry's plight. But she also understood the risks. Any misstep could intensify criticism, provoke backlash, or reinforce negative narratives. Each move required precision, foresight, and a keen understanding of both public sentiment and the palace's internal dynamics. By mid-December, the story had taken on a life of its own. Opinion polls suggested significant public sympathy for Harry, particularly among younger demographics. Commentary suggested that Charles's decision, while legally within his authority, had emotional repercussions that were difficult to justify in the court of public opinion. Yet traditionalists defended the monarchy, emphasizing duty, protocol, and the preservation of tradition. The polarization was stark, and the public was watching every development with intense fascination. The media storm also affected family dynamics directly. Within the palace, whispers and speculation intensified. Advisors debated whether to release additional statements, maintain silence, or attempt private reconciliation. Even minor gestures, such as a formal greeting or holiday card, were scrutinized, interpreted, and amplified. The storm transformed routine family interactions into potential flashpoints, where every word and action carried symbolic weight. And just when Harry and Meghan seemed to be navigating the storm carefully, a surprise leak changed the trajectory. An internal palace email, intended for staff, found its way to a tabloid journalist. The content suggested internal disagreements about Harry's exclusion, hinting that some members of the royal household privately opposed Charles's decision. The leak reignited speculation, amplified social media debates, and placed pressure on the palace to respond. The media storm was no longer just about a missed Christmas gathering. It was about perception, power, and narrative control. Every move, every statement, and every leak would shape public understanding, influence family dynamics, and impact Harry's relationship with the monarchy. The stakes were enormous, and the intensity was only increasing as Christmas approached. As Harry and Meghan watched headlines scroll across screens, social media explode, and journalists speculate on every possible scenario, they understood one crucial truth: the story was far from over. The media storm had become a catalyst, accelerating decisions, exposing fractures, and forcing every member of the royal family to confront uncomfortable truths about loyalty, authority, and love. And then came an unexpected development. A prominent news outlet published an exclusive interview with a royal insider, revealing details about Charles's reasoning and personal reflections on the exclusion. The revelations added nuance but also fuel to the fire, leaving Harry and Meghan with a new challenge: how to respond to fresh information in a storm that was growing stronger by the hour. In the eye of the storm, Harry and Meghan realized that not all forces surrounding them were hostile. While the media amplified controversy and the palace reinforced its boundaries, unexpected allies began to emerge, both within the royal institution and beyond. These allies were not obvious. Some had been silent for years. Others had quietly observed the unfolding drama from the sidelines. Yet their presence would prove pivotal in reshaping strategies, influencing perceptions, and potentially altering the course of family dynamics. The first of these allies came from a most unlikely source: a senior palace official, long considered loyal to King Charles. This official had been part of the inner circle for decades, privy to confidential discussions, private disputes, and the subtle machinery of palace protocol. Known for discretion, intelligence, and a keen understanding of public perception, the official had quietly monitored Harry and Meghan's exclusion with concern. The official's reasoning was simple: while protocol must be maintained, the human element could not be ignored. Excluding Harry outright risked emotional fallout, public backlash, and damage to the monarchy's reputation. It started with subtle communication. A discreet message reached Harry, encouraging patience while acknowledging the unfairness of the situation. It emphasized that not everyone within the palace hierarchy agreed with Charles's decision and hinted at the possibility of softening positions behind closed doors. For Harry and Meghan, this message was both reassuring and strategically valuable. It confirmed that there were allies willing to offer guidance, insight, and discreet intervention without openly defying the king. Beyond the walls of Buckingham and Sandringham, other allies quietly rallied. Close friends, advisors, and public figures who had witnessed Harry and Meghan's struggles over the years reached out to offer support. These allies provided emotional reinforcement, strategic advice, and public messaging guidance. They understood the delicate balance of navigating media attention while protecting family relationships. Some even suggested controlled, selective disclosures to journalists to shape the narrative favorably, actions that required meticulous timing and precision. One particularly influential voice came from a former royal advisor, someone with deep historical knowledge of family dynamics, public perception, and precedent. This advisor emphasized the importance of subtle influence, noting that power within the monarchy often shifted in whispers rather than public decrees. Public sentiment can be a lever, the advisor explained. It doesn't force the king to act, but it creates conditions under which reconsideration becomes possible. You need allies who understand both worlds, the family and the public. Harry and Meghan absorbed this advice carefully. It confirmed what they had already suspected: they could not rely solely on personal appeals to the king. They needed allies, insight, and leverage. Public support, strategic communication, and measured interactions with sympathetic insiders would be key to navigating the next phases of the Christmas crisis. Even within the family, quiet support began to manifest. Some cousins, previously distant, reached out with messages of empathy. They expressed regret over the situation while maintaining discretion, signaling that not all blood relatives agreed with the exclusion. These gestures, though small, carried weight. They were reminders that familial loyalty persisted, even in the midst of protocol-driven decisions. Allies outside the royal sphere also played a role. Longtime family friends, media consultants, and advisors with public relations expertise provided guidance on controlling narratives and minimizing the risk of misinterpretation. They emphasized the need to remain calm, composed, and strategic, avoiding emotional reactions that could be distorted or sensationalized. These external allies functioned as a stabilizing force, offering perspective when emotions threatened to overwhelm judgment. Interestingly, one of the most unexpected sources of support came from individuals historically aligned with Charles or William. These were people who had witnessed the hardships Harry and Meghan endured, understood the challenges of navigating media scrutiny, and quietly sympathized with their position. Their support was nuanced. They did not openly challenge the king, but offered private counsel, suggesting pathways to mitigate conflict and preserve dignity. The presence of these allies revealed that even within a seemingly unified institution, There were nuanced perspectives, disagreements, and empathy. The allies' support was not without tension. Harry and Meghan had to constantly evaluate trustworthiness, discretion, and potential conflicts of interest. A misplaced word or leaked confidence could compromise relationships, reignite media speculation, or even reinforce palace narratives against them. Every communication required careful consideration, every gesture had to be deliberate, and every interaction carried the weight of potential consequences. Meanwhile, the public's role as an indirect ally became increasingly apparent. Polls, social media trends, and news commentary suggested growing sympathy for Harry. The narrative of exclusion, unfair treatment, and familial estrangement resonated with audiences worldwide. Meghan's strategy capitalized on this awareness, subtly reinforcing the idea that the couple's motives were rooted in loyalty, family, and tradition, not ambition or defiance. Public support, while intangible, became a quiet form of leverage. Even Harry's siblings began to show subtle signs of potential empathy. Though William and Kate maintained formal composure, small gestures, expressions of concern during family calls, carefully worded messages, or subtle advocacy in private discussions hinted at complexity beneath the polished exterior. These gestures, while not publicly acknowledged, offered hope that reconciliation might be possible, albeit through careful navigation of loyalties, traditions, and perception. The Allies' influence also extended to strategic planning. With guidance from insiders and external advisors, Harry and Meghan began mapping potential paths forward. They considered private appeals to sympathetic family members, controlled media engagement, and timing of interactions to maximize effect while minimizing backlash. Each move was calculated, deliberate, and designed to achieve both emotional and strategic objectives. Yet even as support emerged, challenges remained. Allies could offer guidance, encouragement, and leverage, but they could not guarantee outcomes. Charles's decision remained firm, and the formal exclusion stood as a symbol of authority. Every act of support had to be balanced against the risk of further inflaming tensions or creating misinterpretations. The couple had to tread carefully, measuring every word, every gesture, and every interaction. As the days progressed, the network of allies expanded subtly. A cousin, a family friend, a palace insider, and a trusted media consultant all played roles in shaping strategy. Their combined influence created the conditions for potential reconsideration, but only if executed with precision and discretion. The stakes were high. Emotional reconciliation, public perception, and family legacy all hung in the balance. And then, as Harry and Meghan considered their next steps, a particularly powerful ally emerged, someone whose influence could directly impact Charles's decision-making. This ally was not just a mediator, but a respected figure within the royal institution, known for both authority and insight. Their intervention hinted at a potential breakthrough, but also carried risks. Engaging with this figure could provoke unforeseen reactions, shift internal dynamics, and intensify scrutiny from media and the public alike. The presence of these allies offered hope, strategy, and reassurance. Yet it also underscored a critical reality. The path forward was not linear. Every option contained risk, every decision carried weight, and every interaction had the potential to redefine family relationships and public narratives. As Harry and Meghan prepared to act, the stage was set for a pivotal moment. The Allies' support created new possibilities, but the question remained, would it be enough to overcome the entrenched barriers, the palace's authority, and the deeply rooted traditions that had so decisively excluded Harry? The morning after the media storm had fully erupted, Harry sat alone in the study of their Los Angeles home, the weight of isolation pressing heavily on him. He stared at the framed photograph of his parents, Princess Diana and Prince Charles, from happier times, when family dinners were filled with laughter and Christmas was a season of connection rather than contention. The memory contrasted sharply with the current reality. He had been barred from attending the 2025 Christmas celebrations, effectively severing a ritual that had once defined his identity and place within the family. Harry knew the emotional stakes were high, but he also recognized that a purely emotional response would be counterproductive. He needed strategy, timing, and a clear understanding of who in the family might be receptive to dialogue. Meghan, always vigilant, had already begun mapping potential allies within the palace and among extended relatives. They agreed that their first attempt at reconciliation could not be public, reactive, or sensationalized. It had to be measured, private, and emotionally intelligent. The first outreach was subtle. A carefully worded letter, hand-delivered through a trusted intermediary, was sent to King Charles. The letter acknowledged the king's authority, expressed respect for royal traditions, and emphasized Harry's desire to maintain family bonds despite differences. It avoided confrontational language and instead focused on emotional honesty. Harry missed his family. The children longed for connection with their grandparents, and the holiday season was an opportunity to mend what had been fractured over time. The choice of words was deliberate. Every sentence was scrutinized for tone, nuance, and implication. Meghan, with her experience in media and messaging, provided insight into phrasing that could minimize defensiveness while appealing to shared values. The letter sought to create a bridge, not to demand attendance or to publicly criticize the king's decision. It was, in essence, a masterclass in diplomatic communication, combining vulnerability with tact and respect. Even as the letter was dispatched, Harry and Meghan were acutely aware of potential leaks. The media had demonstrated its ability to exploit every fragment of communication, so secrecy and discretion were paramount. Only a handful of allies were aware of the letter, and even they were warned that any breach could undermine the delicate effort at reconciliation. The couple knew that trust and timing were everything in this phase. Days passed with agonizing slowness. Every call, every message, and every interaction became a potential turning point. Harry and Meghan monitored palace activity, watched news coverage, and waited for signs of response. Meanwhile, internal family dynamics shifted subtly. Some members expressed quiet support for Harry's overture, advising patience and advocating for empathy. Others remained silent, reinforcing the barrier created by Charles's formal decision. The tension was palpable, a mix of hope and uncertainty that hovered over every moment. Finally, a response arrived, not directly from Charles, but from an intermediary trusted by both parties. The message acknowledged receipt of Harry's letter, praised his respectful tone, and indicated that the king would consider the request. Importantly, the response emphasized that any decision would be guided by protocol, precedent, and the broader context of the royal family's public obligations. While not a definitive acceptance, it represented a crack in the wall of exclusion. Harry and Meghan recognized this as a small but significant victory. It demonstrated that the possibility of reconciliation existed, however constrained. But they also understood the risk. Premature celebration, miscommunication, or public disclosure could undermine their position and harden resistance. They had to wait, remain discreet, and carefully plan their next steps. Meanwhile, the media, ever watchful, detected subtle shifts in palace behavior and speculated about the possibility of reconciliation. Headlines hinted at tentative openings. Royal tensions could ease for Christmas, and Duke of Sussex makes diplomatic gesture to king. Even vague speculation had impact, shaping public perception and subtly pressuring the monarchy to respond with care. The interplay between private action and public interpretation created a delicate balancing act. Amid this waiting period, Meghan worked closely with Harry to manage internal emotions. The exclusion, combined with media scrutiny and the weight of tradition, had created tension in their household. They spoke at length about patience, strategy, and the emotional intelligence required to navigate the coming days. Every discussion reinforced the importance of unity between them, resilience in the face of adversity, and focus on the ultimate goal: family reconciliation that preserved dignity and minimized conflict. A turning point came when a minor palace aide, sympathetic to Harry and Meghan, subtly suggested a private meeting could be arranged. The aide stressed that timing was crucial, that it should be framed as a gesture of goodwill, and that all parties should be briefed carefully to avoid misunderstandings. This information reignited hope, but also introduced new layers of complexity. The risk of exposure, potential misinterpretation, and the necessity of carefully managing optics both inside and outside the palace. The couple began planning for the meeting, considering logistics, messaging, and emotional tone. They rehearsed scenarios: what to say, how to respond to potential rejection, and how to handle moments of tension. Meghan emphasized emotional authenticity, encouraging Harry to convey regret for any misunderstandings while maintaining clear boundaries about respect, loyalty, and dignity. The meeting would require precision, patience, and an understanding of both overt and subtle dynamics within the family. As the planned meeting approached, internal palace divisions became more apparent. Some members advocated for cautious engagement, emphasizing the potential benefits of reconciliation. Others warned that any concession could be perceived as weakness or could set a precedent for future challenges to authority. The tension between these factions created uncertainty about how the meeting would unfold and what the outcome might be. Every small decision, timing, location, phrasing, carried amplified significance. Harry and Meghan remained focused on their goal, balancing hope with realism. They recognized that the first attempt at reconciliation was a critical test of both personal and institutional willingness to bridge gaps. The stakes were not limited to one Christmas gathering. They extended to the broader perception of the monarchy, the family's emotional cohesion, and the precedent set for how conflicts would be handled in the future. And then, just as preparations were finalized, a sudden complication emerged. A media leak suggested that the meeting might occur, prompting speculation and intense public attention. Headlines erupted. Sussex is poised for royal Christmas reunion? The leak, whether intentional or accidental, threatened to shift the dynamics, introducing pressure from public expectation and potential palace response.